great for them. It could be, additionally, it could be a opportunity. Many times tragedies are to wake people up with not aware that they're every day I'm satisfied. So we should be doing it. All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, we want to come to you seriously about the several important things. Brenda, Lord, I read you recognize this past week she was not really on health-wise, so we pray, Lord, that you would be with her and strengthen her to that good health, so that she can turn chaos to will, concerns on him, especially at his age, to be able to recover, Lord, and confident this time and in significant pain. So we just pray that you would be with him, encourage him at this time. And thank for those that have reached out and encourage him in the life. And we pray for his best friend, Linda. She goes through the surgery here. For the months and pray that you help that to be successful, accomplish what it needs to for her. And we pray as well for Rex needs and situation we're going through. Just pray that you would continue to bring that. Lord, we think of California, sometimes we get just involved in the world and don't realize the real trial that others attended here. Some have lost all and don't even know how to rebuild and manage. So, Lord, we would ask you for them rather than trying to, at this point, blame this or that. Lord, we just want to pray for the salvation of these folks who died for them. They're concerned about them. And maybe not just pause on politics for a moment and be concerned about souls. All of them. And so we pray that those churches in California, likely and nearby, are now, even today, discerning how they might be able to be a blessing as they minister to those areas that are affected. Lord, we pray that you mean, especially in their salvation, but also for housing and other things that are needed for them. Lord, as we go throughout the day now, just trust that you would be guarding and spiritual, pray that you would speak and be with them. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we don't have Brenda here taking notes here, so somebody else has to come up for us. Let's go back to where we were. And we're just kind of doing a survey here of the Holy Land, and now we're zeroing in on Jerusalem in particular. So I'll put Jerusalem back up there, and we'll go a little bit further here today. All right, we are looking from the south side, we're looking north. And if you look, I just want to point out some things that we'll be looking at a little bit later here. So this right here is the city of David. You can see this. This is the ancient city of David. And there's something off to the right here along this. I can't really tell exactly where it is here that we're going to be looking at today. It's a spring called the Gihon Spring. The Gihon Spring was outside the walls of the ancient city of Jerusalem, the ancient city of David. Now again, let me remind you, this right here is the ancient city. This is what David conquered. His palace would have been in the upper western corner there, northwest corner. Today, these walls right here built by the Muslims, those are not, we want to look at that and we want to say, oh, Jesus' day. No, those are not the walls of Jesus' day. Nevertheless, they are called that is called Old Jerusalem. If you go to Jerusalem today and you say, I want to go to the old city, you're going to go inside of those walls and, shop and be a tourist inside and drop some American dollars inside this area here. But this is all Jerusalem. Everything out here, and the hotels and the malls and things are out there. And the population of Jerusalem today is, I think, just short of 1 million, somewhere around somewhere around 1 million. But of course, it's very expansive. And then kind of in the middle, a little bit over on the eastern side, is this ancient city, old city of Jerusalem. But the oldest part of it is here. And so we're going to look at some of that more specifically today. The Kidron Valley, the Garden of Gethsemane, right down here. The Garden of Gethsemane. That is where Jesus was praying and then arrested. He was betrayed in that garden and then crossed the brook Kidron. He would have been taken over here. Caiaphas's house is right in this area right here, we think. Nobody knows for sure, but because this place was destroyed. So the things that are there and the things that are standing are pretty much post-Christ day, except for the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount was something that was so significant that the Romans couldn't just obliterate it. They got everything that was above grade. They were not able to destroy everything that was below grade. And so the structure of the Temple Mount is really the only thing that we can say, all right, that was definitely there at the time of Christ, that platform. So we call it the Temple Mount, that platform. In the distance, now I want to point out a gray dome here. There's actually two of them, but really only one of them can be seen right there. And that is the church. Let me go ahead and go to the next slide. Maybe that will help. That is here. That's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Going back, and then we'll return there, it is here. That is a place where many, probably population-wise most, Christians believe that Jesus died and was buried somewhere underneath that church. Okay, now I need to explain something historically for a moment. Jesus died in about the year 30, AD 30-ish. And 40 years after that, this was destroyed, which would have been about 2 years after the death of the Apostle Paul. The only apostle still alive when Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, by General Titus, would have been what apostle? The only apostle still alive. Only one. I'm hearing it. Okay, that's good. I wanted enough to think through. It's John. John was probably the youngest of the apostles, really perhaps a younger lad. And so he's living beyond that. The rest of them likely had all perished. If Paul died in 68, well then the revolution, the revolt of 66 had already begun. But he wasn't, by that time, anywhere near Israel. He would have been over in Rome, probably imprisoned. And yet he's hearing about what's happening to his land. But he perished. He was executed probably a couple years before the complete destruction of Jerusalem and Galilee. And, the Romans really... 4 years revolt, like the American Revolution, 4 years. And Israel had put the Romans through the ringer. They were very angry and needing to make kind of a showcase of Israel, lest the rest of their regions also revolt, which they're always having to put down revolts everywhere. This one was significant. Israel really put a hurt on the Roman legions during this revolt. So they really, of course, they were very angry when there was just a rage, and they destroyed things. And so John would have been the only one who lived, frankly, many years after that. understanding that Jerusalem has been destroyed, that Herod's temple is no more, that the sacrifices have ceased. John would have been the only one. So when he's writing John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Revelation, man, his heart is at the same time very, very heavy. But he's recognizing that there's events yet coming that are greater than the destruction of this, that make it much larger, which is, Armageddon and other things that he's writing about. Okay, so Jerusalem is destroyed, and Rome is becoming more and more pagan, and Christianity is spreading throughout the Roman Empire. I mean, like a wildfire, it is spreading all the way to England and turned the world upside down. It's not stopped. So we have two things going here. The nation of Israel, the Jews, and then we have genuine Christianity, the gospel, through the apostles and now many others, is spreading. And though Jerusalem is destroyed, and of course the early church, the first church, the one we're reading about in Acts, is really under great trial here in Jerusalem with its destruction. But Antioch and other cities have become sort of a new capital for Christianity. God has provided other cities and other regions, other churches to kind of take the mantle. Antioch being the Apostle Paul's sending church, Barnabas and Silas. And we know now the first 300 years of church history, persecution in the Roman Empire grew. It became more and more grievous. Focused not on Jews, focused on born-again believers in the city of Rome and throughout the Roman Empire. It was at first that, they would just tell you to stop and don't do that. And if you would, even in the presence of a judge, if you would bow to an idol, he would allow you to leave. Okay, sounds good. You can go. But by 300 AD, that's changed. There's executions. It is very grievous in the Roman Empire. Then comes along Constantine. Now, some of you probably recognize that name, Constantine, Roman emperor in the early 300s, which is 4th century AD. And he has an experience. He is going out to battle, and he's concerned about it. He's fighting an enemy. He's very concerned about the battle that's going to take place tomorrow. And apparently has a vision then the night before that says, in this vision, it says, "By this sign, conquer." And the sign was the sign of the cross, or some symbol that depicted Christianity, the very Christianity that he was opposed to and that previous emperors had opposed grievously. And now, this is alleged now, the story goes that he's being presented in a dream, in a vision, that if he would ally himself with Christianity, he would win the battle tomorrow. Well, as concerned as he was about the battle of Melvin Bridge, that he decided to do that. And so apparently the next day he maybe have painted the sign of the cross on the shields of his soldiers. There's different accounts of this because it's 1,700-year-old history. So, and who knows what has been rewritten in the interim. But the story goes that he, converted to Christianity to win the battle, and he won the battle. Now he took that as that's the thing to do now, and became a Christian. Had his soldiers baptized. Constantine became a Christian. Now, did he genuinely get born again? I don't know. I never talked to him. I don't know. I would be glad if he did, wouldn't you? That'd be good. I'd be glad to go to heaven, and I don't want to go to heaven and see him there and say, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be, whatever." I don't know. From what we understand, it's not likely. It was just something that, was beneficial to him at the moment, and so probably not genuinely understood the need of payment for his sin and all of that. But anyway, okay. That aside, Constantine had a mother. Well, most everybody does, right? All right. His mother's name was Helena. Helena. And it's presumed, well, it's understood that Helena also had a conversion experience. Now, that's going to change church history. I don't really want to go down the path of church history, but within a short period of time, within that century of the 300s, the Christianity would go from being hunted and persecuted and executed to being not just accepted, tolerated, and then legalized, officially legalized, so that nobody in any region of the Roman Empire could now persecute Christianity, to becoming the only acceptable legal option. You had to be a Christian by the end of the 300s. By proclamation of the emperor, you had to be a Christian. And that was set in motion, if that surprises you, what we have today. Of course I'm a Christian. What else would I be? Do you think I am if I'm not a Christian? I was born a Christian. Okay, well, that started back many, many years ago, that sort of thing. And opened up another real problem for genuine believers. But I want to talk about Helena for a moment and bring this back to Israel. Helena, we don't know as much about Helena as, the mother of Constantine, Constantine the First, Constantine the Great. That's all the same person. She may have genuinely been born again. I don't know. She left what was at that time a city named for her son, Constantinople, which is present-day what? Istanbul. Today it's Istanbul. It was Constantinople for 1,000 years, and before that it was a Greek city called Byzantium. Consequently, this would be called the Byzantine Empire, after that name. Helena leaves Constantinople and comes to the Holy Land. She is burdened about God's people, about the Lord Jesus, and about all of the things that she found in the Word of God that he did, miracles and locations. And she came to Israel, and she traversed the country, which was ruins. It was mostly inhabited by Arabs. Many of the Jews had been expelled or carted off into slavery. And so Helena went throughout the land, talking to local people, roughly 300 years after Christ's death. She's asking all kinds of local people, where was he born? Where did he die? Where was he buried? Where did he ascend? Where did he live in Nazareth? She went throughout the whole country. And local people, there's traditions. They would point, where would they point? Well, they would point and say, okay, that happened over here. This miracle happened over here. His birth happened right there. And Nazareth, his home was here. All over the country, from one end to the other. Now, what did Helena do when she learned of those locations? She built a church on it. She built a place of worship on that location. And many of those churches are still there. Now, they've been remodeled and rebuilt, and if they were knocked down, they'd put them back up again. But yeah, about 1,600 years, all of these churches rose. Now, what sort of churches would they be? Are they Baptist churches? They're Catholic? Yes. There are also many what? There are some synagogues around. That would not have been her doing. What else would there be that would be kind of equal to a Roman Catholic Church? The church that is built on the site of Christ's birth, there are 3 churches. It's one building managed by 3 different denominations, and they don't get along. Catholic and Orthodox. Orthodox. In fact, Constantinople was the Eastern Roman Empire. That's Eastern Orthodox. They came into odds with the Roman Catholic Church. In fact, in the year 1000 and something AD, the Pope of Rome excommunicated the head bishop of Constantinople, so the bishop of Constantinople excommunicated the Pope. They excommunicated each other. They split. It's called the Great Schism. So there are Orthodox churches, Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, all kinds of various Orthodox churches around, which is similar to Roman Catholic churches, quite similar. If you entered into one of those churches, you would find similarities, but they are not, they are different. But those churches are all over the place. Now, Helena placed these churches, built these churches all over. And her son, Constantine, was all about it. In fact, he came and visited too. But she was the one doing all of the work, all the labor, and finding the locations. Now, do you think that the locations are all dead on? Like, what's the possibility that after 300 years, most of the Jews, of course, Jewish population, not accepting the life and the work, the ministry of Jesus, right? He wasn't the most popular. He wasn't the George Washington of the country. So we walk around putting up signs, and because we love George Washington, they didn't love Jesus. But then even the Jews, his own people, are expelled from the country, and we're left with, the Arab folk that are there. And what do they know about Jesus? Probably even less. I mean, we don't know for sure whether these sites are the real sites or not. But if you go to Israel and you say, where was he born? They will take you to the spot. It's under a church. It's down you got to go downstairs. You got to go down in the rocks and everything. And then they say there, and there's all kinds of paraphernalia all everywhere. And that's the spot. It's marked off by gold and stars and all kinds of hanging incense objects, and you got to stand in a long line to get there, and there it is. And that's where Jesus was born, right there. Probably most of these sites are not on the spot. They might be somewhere near, might be. You wouldn't want to spend a lot of time just visiting churches. I think there are some sites, and I may show you some, that we can maybe be a little bit more confident in than some others. But Helena, while she was there, she visited and was told that Christ's crucifixion and burial took place there. Now, in 300, these walls were not here. That's 1,000 years before these walls were put up by the Muslims. Were there any Muslims available in Helena's day? No, she was doing this 300 years before Muhammad was born. So I think we could say with some confidence that there was no Muslims on the planet. Okay? So you got to just kind of get everything. This is why, by the way, history and dates, you say, how many of you really didn't like dates in history? You didn't really care for dates. Okay, I see those hands. Okay, there's an altar down here. You can come forward and you can get that thing right now. But you know what? Without those dates, you don't have a context. And it's very important to have a context to these events so that we can know, okay, wait a minute, when Helen is doing that, it's Roman Empire, there's no Muslims around. Because if we get time, I'll show you some of this today. Muslims will make claims that you go, wait a minute. Well, if you know the dates, you know the claims are not necessarily accurate. But in this particular site, Helena was told that is the site of his crucifixion and his burial. Come and we'll show you. And it is alleged that she found the cross upon which Jesus died. The cross. Not a cross, his cross. What do you think? 300 years? That is a common thing. Honestly, if you ask Catholics today, they'll say absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. To them, that is what's called a relic. You ever heard of a relic? Yeah. Anybody that has any knowledge of Roman Catholicism, to them, this is an altar, and in every church, there must be a relic, a legitimate relic, placed in the altar in order for that to be a legitimate holy place in their church. Every Catholic church must have a relic of sorts. That relic needs to be something original and something from, biblical times. And so there's a lot of various relics, like, maybe part of Moses' rod, or, I've heard of varieties of things, like hair from Balaam's donkey. Yeah. And I've never done it, but I suppose you could go into a church and say, I'm just curious, what is it that you have as a relic that brings, that makes your altar there legitimate and holy? And they would need to, tell you what that is. Well, this would be like the ultimate relic. Piece of the ark, for example. Noah's Ark. To have the original cross, of course, we'd wonder where it is today. But anyway, now whether Helena claimed that or whether that was said later, that, oh yeah, she found this, the Crusaders, 700 years after Helena, come to Jerusalem and conquer Jerusalem from the Muslims for a short period of time. They didn't. So the Europeans came and took Jerusalem, and they literally left graffiti in the church there. You can go into the church and find where the Crusaders, it's like carving their initials, but really they were etching the sign, mostly the signs of the cross, into stone on the inside of the churches, because they wanted to, this place had been under the control of Muslims for so long, and they were happy to return it to Christianity, and so to authenticate this. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Is that the location of Christ's crucifixion and burial? Both of them if you go into the huge church building, you can visit both the location of his burial and the location of where the cross was. And didn't we go in there? Were you on that trip when we went into the church there? Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Who was there? Who went on that trip? We didn't always go in there. It's not, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but the guides definitely want to get you there. It is a huge attraction, but there's a better location to go to, and I'll explain that and show it to you. Okay, any questions about that? The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is what that is. So you have Church of the Nativity down in Bethlehem, Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Jerusalem is divided into 4 quarters today. 4 quarters. There they are. A map there's locating the 4 quarters. Even, it's kind of like this. In New York City, you have various different neighborhoods, right? You have different neighborhoods in New York City. This is Chinatown. And it's almost 100% Chinese that live there. You have Jewish areas of New York City, and most cities aren't that defined, but New York City kind of is, and Jerusalem is. So here is the Christian quarter, right here. And that is where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is. The most significant matter here. It's defined here by the Jaffa Gate and by the Damascus Gate, right there. Then you have the Muslim quarter. And the Muslims are on the Temple Mount is under their care. You have the Armenian quarter. So there were many hundreds of years ago, there were many Armenians that migrated to Jerusalem, and so they established themselves there. And you have the Jewish quarter, right here, who are kind of late comers. 1948 is kind of late, okay? And 1967, then they conquered the rest of the city. But there are 4 quarters there, and it doesn't mean that you can't shop or visit or even live in a different area, but for a Jew to live in the Muslim quarter, that might be a little dangerous. It could be. You might be fine until something happens, and then things can flare up like really fast, especially in Jerusalem. And that kind of happened one time while we were there. But anyway, 4 quarters there. And this is Jerusalem looking from the west. So you see the Temple Mount on the far side, on the east side. But a nice shot because you drop down into the Kidron Valley, and then as you rise on the other side of the Kidron Valley, you go up onto the Mount of Olives. So the high ground up here, this is the Mount of Olives, right here. And this is Mount Zion. There's 2 valleys in between. One here, Kidron, and one here, the Central Valley. This is a different mount than this. This is the Mount of Olives. This is called the Mount of Corruption. Mount of Corruption. It's interesting that they would call it that. You have your Bibles there. Let's turn to 2 Kings chapter 23. Second Kings 23. As we're reading this, we are about 400 years after David, and we're reading about the reforms, the work of King Josiah, a young king that really got a hold of God and wanted to do right, and he began to really take care of some things that were long overdue. And we won't read down through the whole thing. It's interesting, though. Look at verse 6. 2 Kings 23:6. And he brought out of the grove from the house of the Lord without Jerusalem under the brook Kidron, and burned it at the brook Kidron, and stamped it small to powder, and cast the powder thereof upon the graves of the children of the people. And look at verse 7. And he brake down the houses of the Sodomites that were by the house of the Lord, where the women wove hangings for the grove. He's taking down garbage. This stuff is the worst stuff. You think it's bad in America, I'm telling you. That's what it is. Josiah is ripping this stuff down. He's tearing it down. I'm sure some of the people are going, really? Can we do that? But genuine people who are walking by faith are saying, yeah, it's about time we get rid of that stuff. And he takes it to the brook Kidron, which is right down there on the other side. I'll show you some more pictures of the brook Kidron up close. And he's taking it down there, and they are burning it, and they're crushing it, and getting rid of it. And it's very interesting, and it's all coming. This stuff had crept right up into the Temple Mount and was there. Now, is Herod's temple built? What's on the Temple Mount? What's on the Temple Mount? 600s BC. It's on the Temple Mount. Is there a temple there? Yeah, which one is it? We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Is it Solomon's temple? Solomon's temple was destroyed in 586. So Solomon's temple is up there, and it's like 400 years old, almost. So they haven't taken good care of it. They've been more concerned about other additions that they've put onto it, like these, whatever this place is, to the Sodomites. And Josiah begins to restore and rebuild and repair and purify. All right, so we can't read the whole thing, but let's go down to verse 12. And the altars that were on the top of the upper chamber of Ahaz, which the kings of Judah had made, and the altars which Manasseh had made in the two courts of the house of the Lord, did the king beat down and break them down from thence, and cast the dust of them into the brook Kidron. And the high places that were, notice now, before Jerusalem. That means outside of Jerusalem proper, which were on the right hand of the Mount of Corruption, which Solomon the king of Israel had builded for Ashtaroth, the abomination of the Zidonians, and for Chemish, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, the abomination of the children of Ammon, did the king defile, which, that's a good thing. He defiled them. And he brake in pieces the images and cut down the groves and filled their places with the bones of men. What are we talking about? We're talking about that right there. This mount right here is apparently the one in which Solomon built the idols for his wives. They pulled his heart away from God, Jehovah, and they said, oh, I used to do this when I was a little girl and my people and whatever. Would you? And his heart was drawn. Okay, sweetie, I'll do whatever. And over there, it became a whole other place of worship, across from the temple that he had built, his own temple. There was another across the Kidron Valley, and today, even today, they still call that the Mount of Corruption. And it's right south of the Temple Mount. My first trip to Israel, our guide, just, pointing out various things, and, you're there for the first time, you're trying to take in everything. And he pointed over there. He had no love for Palestinians, Arabs. Today, that is an Arab settlement, Palestinian, right there. About 100% of the people that live there, and you can see it's well populated. I'll show you closer pictures of it. They're Arab. They're Palestinians. And our guide said this. I don't know how accurate this is, but he said about 90% of the terrorist attack on Israel come out of that place. Now, I have no way to confirm that. I don't know. That's what he said. He said a significant portion of the attacks, the suicide attacks, come out of that place. And the only thought that I had was, Solomon, what did you do? You created a stronghold, a place where Satan had headquarters right across the Kidron Valley from the Temple Mount. And apparently, so many hundreds, thousands, really, years later, it's still a stronghold. Interesting. Okay. I thought I'd do this for you. We took Florida and dropped it there in the Middle East. Now you can see how big the Middle East is. That's what Florida would look like to scale, right there, and superimposed over Israel. And if we reverse it, that's Israel minus the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and the Gaza Strip, because cartologists are never going to give those to Israel. But anyway, okay, so there's Israel. Does that surprise you? Is that about the size you thought it would be? almost exactly the same size as New Jersey. Florida is said to be 6 times larger than Israel. And this is Israel if you put it in the middle of the United States. The United States is 448 times larger than Israel. That might encourage you to pray for them, because they are surrounded by enemies. And they are surrounded. And it is very important that the United States support them. I will bless them that bless thee. I will bless them that bless thee. All right, we'll go back to the city of David here, which is the south portion here of what is modern Israel. But it was the only part of Jerusalem in that day, the only part of Jerusalem, with a population of about 2,000, we think, in its original day. It would have been in those walls all of David's time. Solomon would build his temple then just up here, up higher onto Mount Moriah. That threshing floor that David purchased for that purpose. Now, the Gihon Springs, I'll mention again, is here. And that is one of the most significant, it's not the only spring anywhere near Jerusalem, but it is the one that kept the city alive. Remember, as we were at Megiddo, we talked about water. If you don't have water, you're done. You're done soon. Sooner than food. If you don't have water, you've got a couple of days. I mean, you really, depending on how hot it is, you don't have any time. So if you have a spring inside your walls that flows all the time and is reliable, well, you're in really good shape. But many don't, and in this case, the spring is just outside the wall. The Gihon Spring is about a little over 100 feet outside the walls. And so there was various times, like it's pictured here, that they would literally extend the wall somehow and get around that. When the Assyrians came to conquer Jerusalem in Hezekiah's day, they didn't have time to fortify, to get the wall out there and fortify it in good shape with the Assyrians, more than 100,000 soldiers out there. So what did Hezekiah do instead of working on a wall? Anybody know? What did Hezekiah do? He tunneled underground. Did you guys go in the tunnel? Hezekiah's tunnel? You probably went down Warren's shaft. Okay, they tunneled underground, and I'll show you in a minute. They tunneled from both directions, and they didn't have it just perfect because they were kind of missing each other. So the tunnel kind of winds around, but like the Transcontinental Railroad, they finally did meet in the middle, and the water then from Gihon here would actually come down in the lower portion of the city of Jerusalem, which would have been bigger by Hezekiah's day, and they created a pool called the Pool of Siloam. And the Pool of Siloam would be the reservoir inside the walls in that southern portion, and they could get the grade to bring that water in to the Pool of Siloam. You've heard of that. What do you know happened in the Pool of Siloam? Anything? It was a ritual bath where men especially would cleanse themselves before going up onto the Temple Mount. Up. You'd walk up, back up onto the Temple Mount to sacrifice your lamb up there for your sins and that of your family. But there was somebody that was up on the Temple Mount that was asked to go down and cleanse himself. Who was that? Jesus found a blind man. Was this man blind because of something his parents did or because of something he did? No, Jesus says. But to the glory of the Father, he was born blind. And then Christ puts clay in his eyes and tells him to go down to the Pool of Siloam and cleanse himself. there wash his eyes, and he came back seeing. All right, just another shot of the Temple Mount here. And now from the opposite side. This is looking at the Temple Mount from the east side. So just a couple. You see a gate here? All right, that is called the Eastern Gate. There's another name for it, and I can't remember what it is right now. But that would have been the main gate. Jesus would have gone through that many times now. It's been a rebuilt gate because those walls above grade were leveled. But that right there is bricked up. And Suleiman of the Muslim there decided that he would brick that gate up, seal it up for good. Because though they believe and teach that Jesus is not the Messiah and will not return, he is returning. Muslims will say that Jesus is returning. He did not die on a cross. He did not ascend to heaven, but he is returning, and then he will die. Not for the sins of the world, but he will die. And when he dies, after he comes, he will be buried in Medina next to Muhammad, where there is a grave ready for him. I don't know, hardly anybody knows about this, but look it up. There's a grave, an empty grave next to Muhammad in Medina, and that's for Jesus. And when Jesus returns, he will die, and he will be buried there. His body will be buried there. Well, no, it's not actually going to happen that way. But anyway, we know that Christ is going to return. He's going to land on the Mount of Olives, which is down here. You know, it's down here. This mountain is going to split in two, and he's going to go through that gate. This is what the scripture says. He's going through that gate into the temple, a temple that's not there right now, but a temple that will be there. He's going to go through that gate, and though the Muslims don't believe that, just in case, they bricked it up. Just in case. Kind of, plan B. And in addition to that, right here, these are graves. It's kind of an odd place for a cemetery, but those are graves. Those are Muslim graves, not Jewish graves. Because they know that it is an abomination to the Jews to walk on a grave. And so that's kind of like fortification to keep Christ from entering into the temple. Now, he's not coming, and there'll never be a temple there, but just in case, he won't get there. And all of what I just told you is true from the point of the Muslims. That is why they put those graves there. And they will tell you that. It's interesting. It is also interesting to note, is the Dome of the Rock aligned with the Eastern Gate? Is it lined up with it? Perfectly, I mean. No. That's an interesting thing. Somebody pointed that out to me when we were standing on the Mount of Olives. Just take a look at that gate, and you can see it from there. This is more of a drone shot here. The Mount of Olives is not that tall. But you can still see over the walls, you can see the Dome of the Rock. And you can tell that they're not lined up. Okay, does that indicate that both a temple and the Dome of the Rock could sit there at the same time? Yeah. Might the Antichrist consider such a compromise to allow both Muslim and Jews to kind of shake hands on it and move forward? Because you and I can't imagine right now how in the world you could ever get a Jewish temple up there without bulldozing a mosque. And you bulldoze a mosque and you've got a problem. You've got a major problem. I don't know. That mosque won't be there by the time Christ, worships his Shekinah glory, re-enters that temple. But anyway, there's just some thoughts. There are many, many thoughts. Here's a picture of the Temple Mount in 1862. Anybody know what was going on in 1862? Come on. American history. Dates. Oh, I don't like dates. I don't like dates. 1862, what's going on? Civil War. 1861 to 1865. Abraham Lincoln is the President of the United States. 1863, Emancipation Proclamation. 1864, he's reelected to a second term. 1862, the American Civil War. While the Americans are fighting in our Civil War, that right there is what the Temple Mount looked like. Doesn't that kind of blow your mind? Like the whole world is supposed to stop when we talk about American history. There must be nothing going on anywhere else in the world. Does it look like from that photograph? That's a photo, not a painting. It's a photograph. Does that look like it's well cared for? Just like it's a focus of Muslim worship? Just interesting. Just keep an eye. I've got other pictures here. Do you know that in 1878, Ulysses S. Grant visited Jerusalem? Former President of the United States, Ulysses S. Grant, visited Jerusalem. Would have seen this. Does it look well cared for? 1920s. Contrast that with today. Does it look well cared for? It has become more significant to them today likely because of the Jews, the refocusing of the Jewish people on the Temple Mount. So since the Jews are more interested in it, so are they. And so they've poured a lot more money into it. What is, for the Muslims, is this the first, the most important holy site, the second most important, the third most important? Do you remember? It's third. The third most holy site. To the Jews, it's number one, because it's the place of the Holy of Holies. They're always one. Supposedly, that's built on the spot of the Holy of Holies. There's a rock protrusion out of the ground, out of the mount right there, that is said to be where the Ark of the Covenant sat. But that's, we don't know that. But it's the third most holy site. We were actually talking about this and never concluded it. And somebody mentioned, I think it was you, Monty, wasn't it? What happened here, Monty? Do you remember what happened here to the Muslims? Okay, Muhammad's ascension happened allegedly from this mount right here, from this place. They built this on the spot. Honestly, that dates back to within 100 years of Muhammad's death, that building. Now, it's been rebuilt and, whatever, but it's been there a long time. And so when he died, supposedly down in Mecca, Medina area, but then he got on a horse, a winged horse, and flew from Saudi Arabia to Jerusalem, to this location, and from this location now, he was taken up into heaven. That is the Muslim teaching. And the name of that is, it's called the night ride. I think there's another word that goes with it. Something about the night ride. I had a Muslim man try to convert me in Jerusalem, telling me all about this. Well, I already knew about it, but we were working on each other. I'll maybe tell you a little bit more about that. Very interesting. All right, any questions about any of that? We've got a lot more to see. We'll see how it goes. All right, thank you. See you for the service.